Hey everybody, how's it going? Today I want to talk about some weird Bible stories. There are a plethora of problems when it comes to parenting that I don't even know how to approach or how to start to deal with, but today I want to talk about one that is, I think, exceptionally strange, but one that apparently people have kind of just dealt with for centuries. I was raised in a Christian household and I'm trying to do the same for my children, but as I'm doing that and looking at all the stories that I grew up on and looking how my children react and respond to them, as well as just like the way my brain looks at them differently as an adult compared to how I was when I was a kid, like, how do we put these stories in kids' brains? I feel like that's an entire video unto itself where I could talk about all those things, but today I want to talk about one specific story because my kids have been talking about it a lot lately, and that is the story of Samson. Samson's probably one of the most popular and well-known Bible figures, but in case you're not in the know, here's some stuff that you need to, know. The story of Samson is found in the book of Judges, and he's known for being like super strong as well as like having really long hair because when he was born, his parents were told that he can't touch dead things, he can't drink wine, and you should never cut his hair. When Samson becomes an adult, his life becomes really crazy because the Israelites are kind of occupied by the Philistines, so you have kind of this like empire rebel thing going on, and Samson becomes a really important part in that fight. After 20 years of being kind of the hero of Israel, more or less, he falls in love with a woman named Delilah, who finds out one of the reasons he's so super strong is his pact with God, which included not cutting his hair. So, what does she do? She figures that out, sells him out to the Philistines who come, they shave his head, they gouge his eyeballs out. That was a really important part of it, I remember as a kid. He's then more or less taken as a slave until one day he is brought out to entertain the Philistines as they can say, look, here's Israel's hero, we got him, hooray, hurrah! And he's like, hey, I need to lean against a pillar. And he pushes a pillar over and thousands upon thousands of Philistines fall to their death or are crushed. Samson also dies in the encounter, and we are told in the Bible that during that last act, he killed more Philistines then than he had during his entire life put together. It's a good time, right? But here's the thing, my kids have a lot of questions, and the main one seems to be like, why would Samson do something that he knew would end up killing him? My youngest kid in particular seems fascinated with the story. He will reenact Samson a lot. He'll go up to a pillar and be like... Other adults who see it think it's adorable and they say, hey, are you being Samson? He goes, yeah, but he died. And here's the part that's really, really bizarre to me is almost universally after he says that, the response from almost every adult that he's said that to, they all respond in the same way. Yeah, he did die. But you know, he killed more Philistines then than he had in his entire life. Now, I grew up in the church as well, and that was kind of what was always brought up to me also, that Samson died, tragic as it may be, but he did more in that single act than he had throughout all of the 20 years he served as a judge. But as a parent looking back and telling a 5-year-old, it's okay that he died because, well, he killed more people then than he ever had before. And maybe it rubs me the wrong way because I live in, modern, current world times where somebody who does that is called like a terrorist. That's all good for the shock value, of course, but I think that there's a bigger question that we need to consider as far as like churches and religions and politics and culture and everything, and that is why in the world are we so consoled by numbers and knowing that we won? I have discussed the story of Samson like hundreds of times throughout my life, and there's a couple of things that keep coming up over and over and over, and this idea of winning is one of them, and it seems so problematic to me now, even though obviously I never understood that as a kid. The problem I feel is that in general, modern Christianity likes to talk a lot about winning and losing. Some of that language has been built into the religion for, all of its existence with things like victory in Jesus and victory over death and people who are lost and people who are saved. So I understand where it comes from. But I think we've taken a more interesting turn in that we feel like we're on the losing side now and we have to fight back and we have to win. One of my first years of teaching, I remember a student talking to me about how she was going to be baptized. And I said, oh, that's cool, congratulations. She's like, yeah, whatever. It's just at this one church. It's my friend of mine. They were told that if they could get more and more people to be baptized, then, I don't know, they win. I don't think that's typical across all American churches, but it's still something to be considered as something that seems a little bit problematic. Other talking points in modern Christian culture involve things like the war on Christmas and the war on conservative beliefs and the war on us. Again, that could be a topic for a completely different video, but what I want to focus on now is that idea of like, why do we feel like we have to win? Christians love the story of Samson because at the end he does still win more or less, but I think it's still rooted in something that is very old and maybe not as relevant to our current worldview, and I'm gonna get people angry at me for saying that. But here's what I mean. The context in which Samson was living is an occupied people. He is working and striving and fighting and killing against a group of people that are oppressing his people. A lot of context for the Old and the New Testament are in that kind of framework, that they are a people oppressed, that they are looking for heroes, that they are looking for liberation, that they are looking for freedom. And I understand that in a modern Christian context, the idea of being saved and that kind of freedom and victory in Jesus has shifted to some degree, but we still talk about it with just as much violent imagery as we did then, and that is problematic. The one thing that hasn't seemed to change since Samson's day and ours is that as a people, we seem to often be living in fear. We're afraid of the outside influence. We're afraid of being taken captive, and we're looking for heroes to go like blaze a path for us with some kind of like fury and anger, and if they can take somebody down, we get really, really excited about it. Given the context of war and violence of that time, Samson is an obvious Bible hero, but I think there's still ways to talk about a story that keeps him as a Bible hero now. And if we focus on his final act, it is an act of sacrifice, an act of atonement, an act of redemption, an act of recognizing your own flaws, being sorry for that, and doing the best thing that you know how to do in that moment. I can't imagine Samson being a guy who's sitting there against that pillar and be like, all right, tactical strike, here we go. Instead, I see a Samson who realizes what he's done, who recognizes how he messed up so many times, who looks at himself and says, I can do more than what I've done before. I can do something for my people, for my community, for my group. And right now, this is the one thing I have to offer. In that case, it was murdering thousands and thousands of people, something that today, like I said, kind of makes you sound like a terrorist. But I think there's a lot in the story that we can reframe for a modern context that is still so helpful and valuable to teach to people. Values about leadership, values about self-sacrifice, values about social activism and helping oppressed people. I think there's a lot of parallels that we can bring into the modern context from something like Samson. Whereas before we wanted a strongman warrior to physically go out and fight and make a space for people. Whereas today we still do need strong men and women to go out and fight and make spaces for people, but it happens in a different context. It's not through hate, it's not even through protests, it's not through saying something's wrong and we're right. It is by going out, looking at yourself, recognizing your flaws and saying, if I'm good enough to be a part of this, then other people are good enough to be a part of this. And I'm gonna work to the best of my ability to make that space and life possible for them. So there we go, everybody. That's going to be my first official TheologiCALE video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please let me know in the comments like what else you'd like me to talk about, because I think spirituality and theology and religion are just fascinating, and there's always more interesting angles to look at, and I would love to be a part of that conversation with you. So leave some comments down below. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you'd like to talk about. If you're going to yell at me, be civil. I'm trying to be civil. I would appreciate that from you as well, and I'd love to talk to you there. Otherwise, if you want to see some of my other theological stuff, right over here is one I did a long time ago about Easter, and right here is talking about how we need more metaphors for God. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great day, and we'll see you later.